Hello everyone, I'm Gerry Bonds and welcome. We're really excited to have you join us as we shine a spotlight on the important work transforming our central Oklahoma communities. At the heart of this progress is the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, or ACOG. For more than 5 decades now, ACOG has served as a trusted regional state partner, providing essential planning and funding services that empower the people in cities and towns across Canadian, Cleveland, Logan, Oklahoma, and parts of McLean and Grady counties in central Oklahoma. From transportation and economic development to public safety and sustainability, ACOG is working each and every day to improve the quality of life for central Oklahomans. We are especially honored to welcome our state legislators, ACOG board members, and distinguished guests who are with us today. This year's video is unlike anything we've done before. Rather than simply celebrating achievements, we're focusing on how our state legislators can make a lasting difference. By supporting the programs we'll be highlighting today through allocated state funding during the upcoming legislative session, you'll be directly investing in projects that matter, projects that make your community safer, stronger, and more connected. So to kick things off, let's take a closer look at one of these important projects in the town of Harrah, Oklahoma. Before we explore the details of Harrah's exciting new project, let's take a moment to talk about the program that actually made it possible. For those who may not be familiar, the Rural Economic Action Plan, or REAP as it's called, is essential to helping Oklahoma communities with populations under 7,000 improve their infrastructure and overall quality of life. ACOG, as a regional council of government, serves as the state-appointed agency to distribute REAP funds in central Oklahoma. In 2025, ACOG will distribute $2.7 million to communities in Canadian, Cleveland, Logan, and Oklahoma counties. That's part of the $30 million the Oklahoma Department of Commerce has allocated for the REAP program statewide. Well, it's my pleasure to be joined today by Harrah Mayor Danny Trent, who's here to discuss their very exciting REAP project. Welcome, Mayor Trent. May I call you Mayor Trent or Danny?
You can call me Danny.
Okay, I'll call you Danny. Well, it's really very nice to meet you. Harrah was really fortunate to receive this REAP grant this year for a sidewalk project that actually addresses a real safety concern. Give us an idea about the challenges that face people on this State Highway 270.
The challenges is the sidewalk ended about 400 feet away from our park. And so you'd either have to walk on the side of the road or the shoulder of the road to get to our park. And so this extends that sidewalk on down. And not only does it extend it down, it extends it another 1,000 feet that it does. And so it's going to be ADA compliant. So where we didn't have access really for ADA, it's going to allow that and make it a lot simpler.
Okay, so I know the project has just started, right?
Yes.
You're just at the very beginning of it.
Yes.
But even at this point, how do you see it changing the daily life for people who suffer these challenges? You mentioned ADA compliant mobility challenges, right?
A lot of the sidewalks throughout the years have not been ADA compliant, and so everything that we're doing is trying to make it more handicap ADA accessible for wheelchairs and things to make it simpler. Moving the road to the side, or the sidewalk on the side, that keeps people out of the road, and safety on that behalf is what that helps.
So the feedback in town has been really good?
It's been really good. Right now, we're just so early in the stages, no one can use it, so it's still not there.
Right.
But it is underway.
But it really is exciting for the town of Harrah.
Yes, it's really exciting to get these sidewalks updated.
And then we look at the big picture. How does this project fit into the big picture for your town?
The big picture within the town that we're looking at is our sidewalks that connect all of our parks, connect all of our schools, and parks and schools together. So everything will be connected with a sidewalk that we can actually have the community that can actually be off the street and walk around town.
What did you say, though, this particular segment is how long now?
It's about 1,400 feet. Total is what it is.
But the big picture would be...
The big picture are
many feet.
Are many miles, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you telling Harrah's story because that helps everybody understand how programs like REAP can make such a big difference. So from your standpoint, why do you think it is so important for our state legislators to keep funding REAP at this $30 million level?
Because cities like Hera that are smaller cities, we don't have the revenue and the tax infrastructure to do that. And these REAP grants really help us out for growth is what it does. Not only has it done it on the sidewalk, but we've also got a grant that did a bar screen here last year for our sewer system, and we also got another grant. So we've got 3 REAP grants here lately.
Wow.
And it has really benefited some of the monies that we have for our city that we can use for other things.
So you would call it a huge impact for the town, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's a great impact for the town.
Well, I want to thank you for being here and explaining this today. You've really helped me learn a lot, and I need to get to Hera.
Yes, you need to come to Hera, and thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. Hera's story is such a great reminder of how important state-supported programs are for our communities. But fire safety is another big piece of the puzzle, and it's something that touches every part of Oklahoma. Rural firefighters here in Oklahoma respond to thousands of fires each year. The cost of fighting those fires can hit nearly $1 billion annually, and that stretches our small, mostly volunteer fire departments to the limit. That's where the Oklahoma Rural Fire Defense Program steps in. Funded by the Oklahoma Legislature through the Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, this program provides essential support to more than 840 rural fire departments across the state. Rural fire coordinators at each council of government make sure that these departments get the equipment, training, and resources they need to protect their communities. So, let's take a closer look at how this important program makes a difference. The Crescent Fire Department has been a vital part of the community since 1929, and they're still going strong. Their service area is huge, 123 square miles in western Logan County and another 31 square miles in eastern Kingfisher County, and that's a lot of ground to cover. Joining me today are Grady Birchfield, Chief of the Crescent Volunteer Fire Department, and Mark Goler, State Forester and Director of Oklahoma Forestry Services at the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry. Chief, thank you so much for joining us. Can you put in perspective, give us an idea of what it's like to cover such a big area?
A lot of times it's kind of challenging, especially when we're in a drought. It's definitely taxing when you've only got a limited amount of guys and all volunteer department. We do pretty good at it, pretty prideful in how we handle the area and making sure we do the best we can. We receive a lot of help from our neighbors, so that helps out a lot, but we also help them a lot too.
How then does the Oklahoma Rural Fire Defense Program help your team tackle those challenges, which are huge?
And that's another aspect of the finances that we deal with constantly. We've seen a drastic increase in pricing of trucks, equipment, just everything over the last few years. It's a very vital piece of equipment that we come to depend on. That's a lot of money for volunteer departments that we can do a lot with, and we try to do the most we can with it.
And I heard recently that the Crescent Department added some metal gear lockers, and that was through a grant with the Rural Fire Defense Program.
Every year we apply for the 80-20 grant that's through the forestry and ACOG agencies. Basically it's for anywhere from stations all the way down to personal protective gear for our firefighters, you name it. We applied for gear lockers this year to replace the ones we had. But now having these new ones, it gives us room to spread out, so to speak. And they're open air lockers, so they dry a lot faster, a lot cleaner, and it also frees up that money to use in other areas, whether it's buying new gear or fuel just to get down the road.
I know you hear this all the time, but thank you for all you and your volunteers do to keep fellow Oklahomans safe. It's hard to really put it into words. Mark, we've just heard about how much the Rural Fire Defense Program has meant to the Crescent Fire Department, but I know they're not alone. Volunteer fire departments all over the state rely on this program, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And can you tell us why increasing funding per COG, as we call it, is such a big deal in keeping these departments strong?
Oklahoma Forestry Services is the state's wildland fire agency, and we're part of the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, and we're charged with protecting all of Oklahoma, the 44 million acres, all 77 counties. The issue is that we have full-time fire protection in eastern Oklahoma in 15 easternmost counties, but in state statute, we're responsible for the entire state. And so the reason why the funding for the Rural Fire Defense Program, the Rural Fire Protection Fund, is so critical is because the Fire Service of Oklahoma, which includes Oklahoma Forestry Services and the fire departments across the state, we work on these issues together, and we count on the fire departments, especially in the western part of the state, as that frontline resource to respond to wildfires and to be that initial attack force that can help us to keep fire small, to help us to reduce the threat to lives and property, and also to our natural resources. So in order for the fire departments to have the equipment and the wherewithal to respond in an effective manner, that's why our funding is so important. So Forestry Services budget this fiscal year is $35 million. $19.7 million of that goes straight to the fire departments in one manner, shape, or form. So $8.4 million is in the form of operational grant checks, $10,000 per and change roughly to each certified fire department in the state, certified rural fire department. Then $2 million goes to the 80/20 grant program that Chief Birchfield mentioned. Then we also have another grant program that is $6.8 million that is to replace equipment that fire departments have used or destroyed or it's out of compliance. That money stacks up, and as Chief Birchfield mentioned, for all of us, the increasing costs of equipment and PPE and everything else that we need to do our job and do our job safely and effectively has gone up tremendously. And so funding is critical for all agencies in order to continue to provide that life safety that we need across the state. It's not just responding to wildfires, but also to the structure fires that the fire departments respond to, vehicle accidents, medical runs, everything else that we're requested to assist the public in. It requires funding and just to keep the doors open. Electric for the electricity, for the gasoline that they need to run the vehicles, water, Gatorade, safety supplies. It just stacks up. So it is an incredible task that we're asked to do for the entire state of Oklahoma. So funding for our agencies is critical.
Well, you've made it crystal clear why that funding is so essential, and I thank both of you for being with us today. We've already seen how important state-supported programs are for our communities, but there's another critical piece that often flies under the radar, the Sub-State Planning District Program. Across Oklahoma, these districts, like ACOG here in central Oklahoma, are working behind the scenes to help local leaders tackle big challenges. Whether it's securing federal and state grants, coordinating efforts to bring in new business and jobs, or offering planning support, this funding plays a big role in helping communities grow and thrive. To talk more about why this program matters and what it means for Central Oklahoma, I'm joined by ACOG Executive Director Mark Sweeney. Thanks a lot, Mark, for being here to talk about a program that I'm sure some people in our audience might not know much about, and that includes me, actually. So give us a kind of a look at what it is.
Yeah, the Sub-State Planning District Program is a program that was developed many years ago and funded through the state legislature, and it was done on an annual basis through the Department of Commerce. And the idea behind it was to provide us with the money to be able to match the grant requirements. In other words, when you receive a grant from the state or from the federal government, it's not for free. You have to bring money to invest into the project. And often that varies between a 20% to a 50% match. And in the case of the Economic Development Administration grant that we get every 3 years, we had to come up with a 50% match, which is pretty much a financial burden for us to come up with those funds. So the sub-state planning funds were for that purpose. Likewise, the money was there for seed money, and that's an interesting term, I guess, to say seed.
Seed money.
Yeah, it basically means that if a new idea or a new problem appears on the scene for our communities. We're given the funding opportunity to be able to do the research and to gather the data on that particular issue with the intent of being able to turn around and present that to the state legislators in the subsequent legislative session to be able to say, here's an issue, here's a problem, and let's find a way to fix that problem, which means funding would need to come from the legislature to be able to address that particular issue.
So you've got the abstract, which is
Yes.
the research, and the concrete,
Absolutely.
which is the specific way to address the issue.
That is correct.
Okay. However, there's been a funding issue with this
Yes.
all along, right?
That is correct.
And is it getting worse, or where does it stand?
So it kind of moves all over the board, but originally we received $50,000 a year to use in this area for the things that I just described.
That
to
was
you.
like way back.
Yes,
when?
we're
Yeah.
talking about 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that funding has now dropped. Now this year we received roughly $27,000, but in the last few years we've gotten as low as $8,500 for an entire year. So it kind of moves around because the Department of Commerce can kind of determine how much that is without much guidance from the legislature. And so because of that, we don't have the assurance of the solid stream of funding to be able to do the projects that we would like to be able to do for our communities. When they have a problem or an issue, or if we need to match a grant that needs to be provided for, we're basically not able to provide that funding as we did in the past.
So specifically, how does this impact ACOG and its communities?
It means that when we want to be able to help a community, whether it's a city, town, or county, that we're forced to take those funds from different directions, like our local funds, which then depletes some of the funding that we do for other things. It's basically the intent always was to provide some level of consistent funding so that we could actually do the regional planning that we're designed to do. That's gotten lost in the woods, so to speak, and the legislature sometimes has a hard time understanding that, but it's not pie in the sky money. In fact, I would say it is one of the most specifically well-used sources of money that is taxpayer funds being addressed to problems affecting the cities and towns and counties in their districts that they represent. So it is a direct line of not just a conceptual idea, but rather addressing problems that are definitely taxing, so to speak, our communities, making it difficult for them to operate in situations where most of these smaller communities do have limited resources and funds and don't have the capacity. That's where ACOG can step in and help them. That's the magic, so to speak, of the sub-state planning funds.
So on your magical wish list, where should that figure be? Back to what you quoted originally?
Yes, I would like this for our organization. The best thing would be to bring it back to 50,000. It probably needs to be assessed as to what they should be now, because 50,000 probably, because of the inflation rate, is not going to go very far. But it should be studied, increased at least to 50,000, and make it so that the Department of Commerce always gives us at a minimum $50,000.
So consistency is what you're
rather than
about.
going all over the map and saying one year I get 8,500, then I guess next year I get 13,000.
Right. How do you plan?
I can't
for
plan
anything?
when I
Right.
don't have consistent funding. It's not a waste of funds, and I think it's hard to explain that concept, but it is really helpful to our communities, and it allows us to function in a much more efficient way. When I mentioned the idea of being match money for the EDA grant, the EDA grant is one that helps us be able to reach out and help individual communities apply for grants from EDA to address infrastructure problems or to bring in new businesses and industries. That's what it affects, is those types of initiatives that we can do with each community. Without that funding source, our hands are tied.
Well, I certainly understand this a whole lot better, and I thank you so much for bringing it to our attention.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a very important topic, and anything I can do to help people to understand how things work at our organization and how funding streams are vitally important.
As we've seen today, programs like REAP Rural Fire Defense and the Sub-State Planning District program aren't just about funding. They're about people. They're about helping our communities grow, keeping our families safe, and ensuring that even our smallest towns have the resources they need to thrive. But these programs depend on your support. By continuing to invest in programs like these, you're not just funding projects, you're building safer, stronger, and more vibrant communities all across Central Oklahoma. To our state legislators and local leaders, we urge you to continue supporting these efforts during the upcoming legislative session. Together, we can make sure programs like REAP, Rural Fire Defense, and Sub-State Planning Districts have the funding they need to keep changing lives and creating opportunities for generations to come. So thank you for your time, for your dedication, and for your commitment to the future of Oklahoma.